job. And he's like, I can cash it out. There will be a little, tax ramification that we'll have to deal with, but this is what we can do. And I'm like, I was just blown away that he was so quick. Like, he saw it, he loved it, and he was excited about it.
Yeah.
And within 4 weeks, he transferred money from the 401k. We paid the tax, on it.
Yep.
And it was just the craziest, fastest thing that ever happened. And to this day, he's still part of the company, just an amazing human.
Wow.
And without him believing in what I was doing and just literally cashing out his retirement, it's not like this guy was super wealthy and just had, money laying around.
Yeah.
That was a huge deal. So that's really how it all started, and that was in 2006. Yeah.
What if you can remember, what characteristics or selling points do you think enticed him? Was it something about you and your relationship, how you treated him? Was it strictly product? What do you think it was? Because I think it's a really important lesson for us to understand, the things that motivate others to believe in us.
Yeah, I think, I knew him at that time, maybe 6-8 months. And, I always showed up on time. We always had good discussions. I was, it was the easy communication. We just got along really well. And I think, going back to me growing up in two different households with two different sets of friends, and I've always been able to evolve or, what I don't know what you would call it, but I would be able to get along with anyone, really, And I think that's a huge, huge thing that people need to realize is when you're communicating with people and you're looking at them in the eyes, and just be honest, be real, do what you say you're going to do, show up on time, and those are all characteristics that people like, and I think that's just what happened. And then the product and how exciting I was probably and the passion behind it fed into him, and he got excited about it too, and it just happened very organically.
Yeah. I know it appears to be organically, but those bullet points that you just listed off for investors, those are oftentimes critical. People invest in people, and that passion that you talked about for what you were doing is really kind of a critical component. So I'm glad that he saw that and he jumped to it. I think it's also a good lesson and reminder for those that are looking for investments and opportunities that those play a key role. So he jumps in. You've got funding now. Very quickly, what happens next? You guys go buy some inventory?
Yeah, so we got some inventory. We built a very, basic little website. And, you're looking at this massive market, and you just, it's staggering to think of what every single vehicle, boat, RV, motorhome, but, you name it, wiper blades can fit it. And so that's really hard when you're starting a company. It's a good thing because everyone needs your product, but it's also a hard thing because everyone needs your product. Mm-hmm. So at that time, any part of business is not without pitfalls and people that don't have the best intentions and stuff like that. And so we had to deal with that very early on in SCRUBBLADE. People that had their hands out and wanted, royalties off blades and stuff that at the time I didn't know. I wasn't a businessman. I didn't go to school for business. I was just going, picking up, going forward and learning as I go. Mm-hmm. So through that, we had definitely some setbacks and some financial hurdles to overcome. But the biggest thing was I thought of who could really use a scrubbing wiper blade, a blade that can clean the windshield better. And right away, the trucking industry popped in my head.
Yeah.
18-wheelers, these guys are driving across the country. They're going through rain, snow, sleet, bugs, dirt, dust, you name it. They're hitting it, And so that focused us at least on a market, on a segment, on a customer that we could zone in on. And so that's what we did.
So you're focusing on truck drivers. How are you going to reach them? Were you looking at selling through truck stops or somewhere more global than that, or everything's online?
So at that time, online was still kind of frowned upon if you were in retail or vice versa. But I was, you know, in Southern California driving around to, say you go to Vegas or wherever you're going, you go by these truck stops. And I remember one that set out to me was Love's Truck Stops. And I was like, all right, so I'm like, we got to go there, you know, like we got to be in there. And so I actually started I mean, all you do when you're starting a company is cold call.
Yeah.
So I'm cold calling everyone, but I started, you know, I finally got to the buyer at Love's and got him some samples. I, you know, told him about the advantage of SCRUBBLADE and, you know, all that. Because you got to think, wiper blades have been out for 100 years. So,
yeah,
you know, you've seen one, you've seen them all at that time. But he listened. He, once again, probably heard the passion coming through the phone and liked the idea of it. And everyone's had, you know, a bug hit their windshield and a wiper blade that smeared it. So he loved it. He got samples. A couple weeks later, he called me back. He's like, hey, man, I love SCRUBBLADE. It's awesome, but we can't buy directly through you. We buy from this distributor. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, so you need to sell them so we can buy it, you know, and have it in our stores. I'm like, oh, okay, well, now who is this? So, you know, you're connecting all these dots as you go.
Yeah.
And so I got the contact info for the distributor, started cold calling them, and, you know, a few weeks later, I finally get to the buyer there, start telling her about SCRUBBLADE and the advantageous design and all this cool stuff. And I could tell she wasn't very excited, but she kind of gave me the benefit of the doubt. And she goes, well, hey, we're having a customer show in, I think at that time it was maybe a month or two away. And she goes, if you want to come and be part of our trade show and our customers like it, then we'll bring it in. And I was like, sounds like a no-brainer. And she goes, by the way, the cost is $5,000. And I'm like, oh. And mind you, at that time, we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And so right then and there, in my head, I'm going, well, no matter what I'm going, but I just need to figure out how to get there. And so I told her we'd be there. That was one major yes that I recall early on in the business, was that trade show. If I would have said, oh, man, you know, I don't have, you know, thinking of $5,000 for just the booth and then the trade show cost to build a booth and the travel and food and hotels. And, I mean, you know, you can add it up in your head quickly. I could have said no, and I could have been like, yeah, you know, like, you know, maybe next year or whatever. But no, I said yes, and we ended up actually borrowing the $5,000 for the show and paid the rest through, you know, out of our own pockets, and we got there. And it was awesome. You know, we had this crappy little booth with wire mesh and some blades hanging and a table in front. It was just so basic and compared to what we do now.
Yeah.
But their customers loved it. It was something new and exciting in the wiper blade world, which wipers are very boring. And we ended up actually landing the Love's account from that show.
Wow.
And we didn't land all of them nationwide, but we landed about 150 of them, and it was just a huge success. You know, it was like, it was amazing.
You know, we make these sacrifices to go do these things, and we listen to our gut, and oftentimes those are the ones that pay off the most. There's too many that are overlooked. I love hearing that you guys stepped into that arena of discomfort to borrow the money and get there. You know, I remember talking to you as this thing was building, and you talked about inventory challenges and big orders and not having enough inventory and trying to get more. And there's been a lot of ups and downs as it relates to that in all companies. I've experienced it in my own tequila and wine businesses. How did you overcome some of those challenges?
So at that time, with the 150 Loves that we finally got after, you know, and it took a few months after that show. It just doesn't happen, as you know. Everyone has their own timing and their own plans and all that stuff. But at that time, we were still like, and a lot of companies I hear, whether it be on, you know, Shark Tank or whoever, or talking to entrepreneurs and that are in a product-based company, it's so hard to get past the point to where you're making money, but you like at that time we were just making enough money to buy a little bit of inventory and pay the bills, but there was just never any money left at the end of the month, pretty much, you know. you're waiting for checks to come in and cash them so you can pay this and pay that. And then, when you're a young company, you can't leverage your vendors, and you can't leverage, lead times and all that kind of stuff and terms. And so we were kind of just barely surviving still through that period. And then we got another shot. We went to a trade show in Vegas, and we got a shot to do a 1,000-store test, or not even a test, a promotion, 45-day promotion in Walmart, which was math. I mean, we were nothing at that time. Like, we were something, but we were nothing.
Yeah, sure.
And once again, it's like, okay, we got the approval. We could move forward with this massive deal at the time. But then there's also that huge expense that comes with doing a 1,000-store test. You have your displays and freight and inventory and all these things that you have to pay for to get this done. And we just didn't know how to do it. So at that time we said yes. We're going to do it. The buyer at the time at Walmart, they know their power, and they're one of the most amazing companies I've ever worked for. But he goes, hey, you tell me what you're comfortable with doing as far as an order order size and inventory and all that, and we'll, whatever you're comfortable with, we'll do. And that was probably one of the coolest things.
Wow.
Yeah, because then I could go back and go, okay, we still want to go big, but we don't want to go too big and be too exposed, and we want to show them we can ship on time and ship 100% and do everything that we should do if we're going to play with the big boys. And so we needed it was about $60,000 just in inventory that we needed. Yeah. And we didn't have it. We probably had $15,000-$20,000 in the bank at the time. So once again, my network, people I've met throughout my life, I think being a likable person and always being honest and doing what I say I'm going to do, I found the $60,000 for inventory. We borrowed another $60,000, bought the inventory, brought it in, shipped 100%. Walmart paid us on time, and it gave us enough cash flow to pay the $60,000 back and actually have a comfortable. I think we ended up, $120,000 in the bank, which for a company our size with low overhead, it was so comforting. Yeah,
I bet.
And that moment, that was in 2011. That was finally a point where we could start functioning like a real company and having adequate amounts of inventory in and being able to grow at a decent pace, because we didn't have credit lines. We didn't, you don't have anything in the beginning.
Yeah, sure.
So that was cool. That was a big point.
So really stepping out of your comfort zones, borrowing money, working with big companies like Walmart, pilot gas stations, going to shows that you can't afford, all great lessons. How did the business progress over the last 7-8 years to where you're at today? Because clearly, I know how the story ends a little bit here, and things are rocking.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, back to that point in 2011, we were in a little office that we moved out of my house. We moved into a little office space, and we had our warehousing off site. And so I wanted to bring all those pieces together. And so my goal was okay, well, if we're spending more on offices here and a 3PL over here, once we're spending more money than we can have our own warehouse and offices, then we're going to jump ship. And that happened actually pretty quick, say within a year. So we moved out of the office space, jumped into our own warehousing and offices. And then from there, we could hold more inventory at a lower cost. And then, at that time, Love's, we were nationwide at Love's at that point. That had been a few years later. And then we started going to the next, TA and Petro, and we got them. And then we went to Pilot and Flying J, and we got them. And then it's just that business, that decision of focusing on the trucking companies, in 2007, 2008, has grown our business to where we are and helped us be a stable company for the last 10 years, and has just been that was a huge decision for me to focus on what market could use SCRUBBLADE. I mean, obviously we want automotive and off-road and rally, and, we're trying to be a cool, fun wiper blade company, but the roots are the trucking.
So, the end of your journey, or at least where you're at today,